You are watching What Wise Women Want here on Charlottesville's Public Access Comcast Channel 13. We are here every week to talk about topics that we think are relevant to you. Ladies, we are 52% of the population with 85% of the purchasing power. What we try to do is help you to make informed choices for yourself, for your family, for your community, and for your children. Each week we talk about various topics that you can find on our website at www.whatwisewomenwant.com, and remember, Wize is spelled with a Z. There you can contact any of the women who are on our panel, as well as contacting us with possible future broadcasts. Today, we're going to be talking about single motherhood. And we have a panel of single mothers, many of whom have had very interesting experiences, including myself, your host, Dr. Daria Brezinski. To my right, we have Jenny Gladding. Jenny is a photographic model and freelance writer. To her right is Treat Jackson, a tax preparer. And I'm sorry.
It's Jackson.
I'm sorry.
It's okay.
Treat Jackson, tax preparer, and her company is called Tax Ladies, Inc. And to her right is Sara Greenfield, real estate broker and jeweler. So let's start, ladies, by giving some information and background to the people in our audience, and tell us a little bit about, well, first of all, I know for myself, I did not choose to be a single mother. My husband walked off with the next door neighbor. So what kinds of situations did you all have very different situations, and if you'd like to share any part of that, it would be really helpful for our audience to hear a little bit about how you came to be a single mother. Jenny, would you like to start?
I think that probably the circumstances around my becoming a single mother are something I would rather not discuss. But I will say that it happened sort of overnight. And it was a complete shock and a surprise and nothing that I was prepared for.
And did you change your, I know my income status changed overnight.
Oh.
Did yours as well?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, I went from my life changed dramatically. You know, I had resources and I had help with children and a very different life, and then overnight, and as I gradually became aware of what was happening, what was unfolding, I found that I actually had no resources. And so I had to reinvent my understanding of myself as a parent and figure out how to survive.
How old are your children?
They're 12 and 16.
Okay. Treat?
Well, initially I became a teenage parent, so I didn't have the traditional setting of a husband. Initially, I became a parent at a young age, and I just dealt with the situation and just continued to parent my son the best way I could with the resources that I had. I grew up in a traditional household, so it was a little bit different because I didn't have a lot of knowledge in my own family home of being a single parent, but I think I did the best that I could with the circumstances at the time.
And how old is
My oldest is 26, and I also have a daughter that's 18.
Okay. Sara?
I did not choose to become a single parent until it was evident that I would be better off as a single parent. And I became a single parent, and my son is 27. He's very successful, and I'm very proud of him.
Okay. So we each had different circumstances. Mine ran off with the next door neighbor. And, most of us don't become single mothers because necessarily that we choose to, but whether it's the circumstances or whatever, we find ourselves. And I've done a lot of statistical information. one of the things that I do is I go to Chamber of Commerce when I talk about single, we keep talking about this mythical nuclear family of mother, father, and child as if it still exists from the 19th century. And I ask people, raise your hand if you were raised by two parents. Raise your hand if your children were raised by two parents. Raise your hand if your grandchildren are raised by two parents. And for the most part, everywhere I go, there's virtually nobody with their hand up whose grandchildren are being raised by two parents. And so we've got this huge myth in our country. And the majority, even when I go to the bank or to the cashier, were you raised by two parents or by one? And almost every single one of them say a single mother. So, what are we, well, tell me, what does it feel like to be a single mother, first of all? I mean, can you express it in feelings? I have a few words, but I'll leave it up to you to say some. Tree?
I would say for me, being a single parent is quite natural. For me, in the African American community, there are more single parents than non-single parents. So I don't feel like I've been shunned in any way as a result of being a single parent. I may have had more opportunities afforded to me because more people were more apt to help me in my situation since they knew that I was a single parent.
Okay.
So for me, it has not been a disparaging feeling for me with my children.
Sarah, how was it for you? How did it feel?
Well, I worked. So from when my son was a baby, he came to work with me, and he was in a portable crib that we would bring to work, and he was at work with me every day. So for me, it was great because he got to, I got to see him grow up for at least the first few years before I had childcare when I needed it, where he could no longer be at work because it was enough for him. He knew when he no longer wanted to come to work. And he would tell me in no uncertain terms that it was time to leave now, and everybody had to go because it was time for him to go home. So when that started to happen, I simply found childcare for the afternoons. And then as he went into schools, he was an after-school program. So I learned to balance my work and my parenting.
Okay. Jenny?
Early on, I think the hardest thing for me was being in all these communities where I actually did see two parents. Like the soccer games, the school functions. And so I was acutely aware that we were sort of missing the father. And it was sad for me. And I think that I felt motivated for a while that was what I needed to do, was replace the father. That's what my children needed, was, to have the whole family put back together, which maybe in retrospect was a way of kind of bypassing the grieving process. And I don't feel that way at all anymore. And I don't feel ostracized or looked down upon because I'm a single. I don't even think about it. I just think that early on that I was more aware of the missing. It seemed like there was a missing piece. But I will say that what I hear from my friends who have partners is that in a way it's easier because you don't have to deal with that extra personality and all the dynamics of the extra personality, and then any kind of arguing or disagreeing over how you're raising your children. So I love that. I love that I'm getting to.
So when you get into situations where I had this, when I would get in situations where they're all couples, I was the only single mother. A lot of times I felt like the women especially were threatened by my presence because, this was a while ago, so in a different age, so to speak, but everybody was threatened by the fact that I was the only single mother in the room and I was after their husbands, which was obviously not true at all. But, so I think at the different stages and different times, single mother, when you think about it, my mother's generation would have never conceived of being, single motherhood. And as a matter of fact, my family was not supportive of me as a single parent, although I had no control over, what happened to me. So, but I found that I was treated differently, as a single mother, whether it was from the school or from the community or from other people who used to be my friends. I no longer had those people as friends, and I had a transition out of, all these people that I thought were friends. Did any of you have that kind of situation?
I learned to disassociate with people who didn't accept me for who I was. And so my friends, many of them were single parents, or they accepted me for who I was and still am. So my feeling was that I did not have a situation where I wasn't accepted because I wouldn't put myself in those situations. And actually, to be honest, I never looked at it that way at all.
That's great.
I think it still exists. Like as a single parent, couples don't tend to invite the single mom to things. If you don't have a plus one,
Yep.
you're not going to be invited. So like Sara said, I would disassociate with someone who didn't accept my situation, because if you can't accept me and my children for who we are, then we don't need to be a part of you.
Okay. Were you going to add? Oh, okay.
I think I have similar experience.
So, all the things that, the drop in salary, the fact that there wasn't two people in the house, earning an income and paying expenses and all those kinds. I know how how dramatically my lifestyle changed. Did all of yours change, or was it Jenny?
Absolutely.
What happened?
Well, I started out,
Were you working when you?
No, I wasn't working. I feel embarrassed to say it. I wasn't working, and I had a nanny. So my situation changed dramatically, and
So you didn't have your own money? None whatsoever?
well, and what I had, went bad. It went to an investment that my former husband put our money in that went bad. So no, I lost anything that I had that I came into the marriage with.
Did you lose your home and everything?
Lost everything.
Okay. So did you get support in any way from anywhere?
My mother was my champion. She was
Okay.
pretty wonderful. Yeah, and
Okay.
we at various times we had, the community was pretty amazing. Really, it's and this may be an answer to a different question, but I think that that my children have benefited from having to see how, in a sense, the village really does raise the child. There was the ballet school that said you can have a 90% scholarship so your dancing child can dance, and the school
Wow.
who helped, so they, there was just always somebody who came forward and made it possible for me. Really, I get choked up thinking about it. Made it possible for me to parent my children the way that I wanted to parent them. It's pretty miraculous, and so I think my children have, rather than being sort of insulated and shy, or relying on the family, that they really have this sense that the world is a good place and that things are possible.
That's fantastic. Tree, you were a teenager.
I was a teenager.
How did you support yourself? Did you have to quit school?
Initially, I had to quit school, and because my mother definitely taught me a lesson that she was not going to be supportive in my venture to have a child. Yes, she provided me with a place to live, but I had to work. I had to work to take care of my son, to provide daycare. She was not one who wanted to be involved with getting on the system. She said she did not want those people in her business. So
You're talking about food
public
stamps
assistance,
and
yes.
public assistance?
She would not have any part of that. So I had to work very early on. So my goal the whole time was to get back to school so that I could provide my son with because once you have children, you want to do better so that you can lead by example. And I needed to get to that so I could lead by example. And as a result, I had to work really hard to take care of my son, to provide. I moved out on my own when I was 18. So I had to work really hard. And I've always worked, at times I had worked multiple jobs. But I know that my children definitely understand that with hard work and determination, you can do whatever. And
So you were never on food stamps or anything?
No, I wasn't.
Wow.
I was not on assistance, and it was to the point where, I always had to work because that's what you do. You go to work. You go to work, and if you need another job, you get another job. So I've had multiple jobs over the years, and all to take care of my children. Yes, I was away from them a lot you know, especially my son, a lot when he was little, because I always had to work and I had bills to pay, and that's what I had to do.
Was he given the opportunity to go to Head Start or any programs like that?
He started school on time, and
or was he in a daycare or what?
he was in daycare. But initially I worked at night, so daycare wasn't a big deal. So he had somebody to sit with him, or family members or whatever. I had support in that way, but definitely not, you know, dropping him off. I had to work initially hard, very hard.
So you got a college degree, didn't you?
I didn't. I don't have. I have associates.
Associates,
so,
yes.
So
well, it's
and I had to
degree.
Yeah, and I had to work.
Don't
really
underestimate.
hard. I had to work really hard, but at the same time, I know my children know that with hard work you can do anything.
Bravo.
Yeah.
Sarah, when you had your, did you get married or did you have your job first? Did you have a job or a business?
I made my business first, so I didn't really know.
You were a jeweler first?
Yes, I became I was a jeweler, and I sold to stores, and I did my own designs, and I sold to gift shops and museums and galleries throughout the East Coast. So I did want not to be a single parent. I wanted my child to have a father. So I did find someone who loved me, and we did get married, but it really did not work out the way I thought it would. I wanted to live, you know, in my own home, and he wanted to keep the town home the way it was. And you know, I was exported. I was imported from Vermont. I went to school in Vermont. I was brought here by my husband. So he brought me here. And once I got here, I was like ready, like, take me home, Scotty. But I stayed, and I got married, even though I really didn't want to. And I became a mom, and that's what I wanted. But I kept my business, and I let go of my wholesale and became a retailer here in town. So people know me as the owner of the Gemstone Collection, and they'll remember coming into the Gemstone Collection, and oftentimes they'll tell me, I remember him when he was this high. And it happens all the time. Yeah.
So you created your business around your son.
I created my life around my son, and I still do, which I do want to say, parenting never stops. Even when those kids get out of school, you're still a single parent, and it still goes on.
Yes.
So it never stops. It continues.
And I too, you know, I think we all have the same scenario with building our life around our children rather than the direction we thought we were going to go with career or our life. We now, you know, we put our children first and then create our world around them. And I think we all probably can, I think most single mothers can say that.
I want to say something too. I found sports and athletics and things for my son to do that he could do outside of school. So I was very adamant that he stay in physical activities that would allow him his outlet, because he was angry and frustrated when we separated, and he wasn't happy, and he let me know that.
How old was he?
He was 3. And so he got that this was not the way he intended anything to happen. And so we had, I was made sure that he would be doing things outside the home and outside of school that was just our activities, but also I felt that recreation was very important. I have a BS in outdoor ed and recreation. It's very important for kids to be active. And I felt that that was important for him.
Well, that's kind of a segue into, you know, as a single mom, our children don't have a man in the house. I mean, we are literally both mother and father. We're the disciplinarian. I mean, I don't know about you, but it was hard to be fun-loving because I was the disciplinarian and, you know, had to be strict a lot of times and set the rules and all that. And I mean, we did have fun, but not as much as I would have liked to have had, you know, had I not been a single mother. But did you find that you needed to provide, you know, especially for boys and male, and the girls need it too, male role models in any way? I mean, whether it's their grandfather or, going out to other kinds of things. Did you have any male role models?
I had my brother. My brother was a large part of my children's life growing up. He took my son to do all of the things that my son probably will be like. Well, he was really rough on me. So my brother was there, and he always took him boxing or something athletic or something that I probably would have been like, no, but he's like, well, he's boy's got to do some stuff. And he always was active. My children have always been active in sports because sports do make a difference. And raising a young man, I also wanted him to have that discipline. He always played sports all through high school, football, track, all year round. My daughter also played basketball all through high school. Always being involved in sports can really change, can benefit any single parent because you know where your children are.
Yep. Yep. Exactly.
You know where they are. You know where they are all the time. And you know they're doing something positive and team building, so it works.
And did you have
We did
male?
that too. We skied and we did swimming lessons and we did soccer and we did as much as I could put together for him. Tennis lessons. We did the gamut.
Yeah.
But he did choose his own mentors as he went along, and he found someone in high school that mentored him, where he is. He is why he's so successful today. I'm grateful for that man. That it was a teacher, took him under his wing, and I'm hugely grateful for that.
And that, Jenny, do you find that your children have male role models? I mean, is it the grandfather or?
Yeah, I don't know that I have an easy answer to that. I mean, my brother was pretty wonderful because he made a point to, often he was living in California, and he made a point to show up for each of his nieces' birthdays every year, and one was in May and one was in October. So he came twice a year, always for their birthdays. And I think, that was very meaningful to them. And but I don't know that we had a specific.
But they do have, males around them constantly. So.
Right. Yeah.
Or extracurriculars.
I mean, we just have a really strong community of friends, and I used that term before about the village. I have a real sense that we are embraced by our village,
Right.
and so they certainly have a lot of adult role models in general.
One of the things that I notice a lot, and even in this town, is that there is a huge number. The working poor in Charlottesville and across the nation are single mothers. And one of the problems is, that I see anyway, is that they find themselves in this single mother status, and unlike you, Treat, they go on welfare and disability and get public assistance and food stamps and all that. And then they get into that groove, and when I try and help them out of it, have them go to school, get an education, as soon as they become employed, they lose all those things that they never had to pay for, and find them, because most of the time they get into minimum wage jobs, and then find that, hey, I'm here in a minimum wage job working my tail off when I could be back here and do nothing and get support.
I definitely can speak to that. One of the reasons why I worked is because I only had one child initially. My children are 8 years apart. And I grew up in Philadelphia, and public assistance, you cannot live off of public assistance. I was already on my own. I already had bills. And there was no way that I was going to stay home and just take what they were giving me when I could go out and do something else. I've had so many jobs, but you can't just stay in one place and say, well, I couldn't stay in one place. I knew that I wanted better for my children. As I said, I had a different upbringing, and I always wanted them to have the things that I was afforded by having two parents, which was sometimes harder because I was one parent, but I just worked. You have to want more, and you have to desire to show your children more. And there's only one way to do it, but lead by example and just keep on going. Just don't stop. It's not easy. Nobody said it was going to be easy, but nobody said it was going to be this hard. I told my mother that before, but you just have to keep on going. And and that's it. Because you can get stuck in the slump, and if everybody else around you is doing the same thing, then you need to change your crowd.
Yep. Yep.
I do think also that having a child made me more responsible.
It did.
And so I had to work harder. I had to focus on my work. And I do not regret the fact that I had to grow up like that once I had my child.
Nor do I.
So Jenny has an unusual experience because she has a community that supports her. But for the most part, single mothers are looked at, hexes, so to speak. They're not like the rest of us with two people. I listen to politicians all the time talk about the nuclear family, and this is what the family looks like, and I'm going, what century do they live in? And what is it about everybody who has this ideal about what a family looks like? How can we change those opinions, since almost the majority of children being raised today are being raised by single mothers? What is it that we can do to be able to change people's misunderstandings or understandings or perceptions about what a family looks like? Anybody have any ideas about that?
I'm stumped. That is a big question, because you don't even see it in television.
Nope.
Commercials are not geared towards single parenting. They are all geared towards the nuclear family, and that's not the norm that most people see every day. I don't even know how we could do that.
And it's the majority of our
start.
population is single parenting. So there's really, we have this ideology that says that this is the way life should be. And even as far as having two men or two women as parents, we started having that conversation, and yet they're not as much of the population as single mothers are.
I really feel that I personally think it's important for a woman to have a child. And if it's her choice not to have children, that's fine. But my friends that don't have children are not as happy as my friends that do have children, whether they're single parents or they're not. So my feeling is that if women don't want to be alone as they get older and they want children or a child, that they should go ahead and have that child and not wait for the right man or Prince Charming to show up, because when they get into their 50s and they don't have children, they do regret it. And I hear it over and over. So very few women are strong enough not to say that, or maybe they don't agree with me, but most of the women friends that I know that are single wish that they had family around them as they get older. And so my feeling to the public is that if it's a choice between being a single parent or no parent, choose the single parenting, and know that you're going to be stronger for it, and your work ethic will get better, and there are support systems around you. But versus having no children, I just can't fathom that.
Well, it still doesn't help us to be able to determine how it is that we can change people's, as I said, we're now talking about two gay and lesbian parents who are a minority of the population, and yet a huge majority as single mothers. We're not having any discussions about that whatsoever. It's never even brought up in conversation anywhere, politically or otherwise.
It's interesting. It's almost a pathology. It's seen in that way.
Yeah.
And I think of that quote from Einstein, you can't change a problem from the same consciousness that created it. And I think we're still operating out of this, this consciousness of a patriarchy that goes pretty much unexamined. Because our politicians are mainly men.
Yep,
They are.
And, I often wonder if the cartoons that I have to say, watching the new cartoons that are out, the new movies that are out and things like that have a completely different focus. For example, Frozen. The idea that it wasn't Prince Charming who saved her, but it was her sister. And the idea of Maleficent, it wasn't Prince Charming who kissed her and woke her up, it was her the woman who watched her surrogate mother, so to speak. So, I feel like I keep going, yay, it's about time. We're not talking about Prince Charming anymore. And I wonder if that is what predominantly drives the population and society to, we keep being fed by Sleeping Beauty and all these fairy tales about how you don't have a life unless you have a man in your life is utterly ridiculous. So, it's good to think about those kinds of things in terms of hopefully we're changing the rhetoric and changing them, because I think those movies, when those girls watch them over and over and over and over again, I did watching Cinderella, Prince Charming is going to come and take me away from my pain and suffering or whatever.
And it's not just us, it's the child. I think when we're focusing on the child, you want, as the child grows up, to be a functioning, happy individual. And so as a single parent or a non-single parent, you are going to go and choose somewhat of the same things so that your child becomes a successful, happy individual. That's what you want for them. That's the only thing we want for them, right? We want them to be happy.
Yep.
We want them to be successful. We want them to either have their own job or be on a track where they can get a good job.
Right.
Anybody wants that.
Right.
Whether they're straight or they're gay, it doesn't matter.
Right.
A child is going to grow, and those growing years are very quick and they happen very quickly, and then all of a sudden they're in their next phase of life, and you've got to be ready for that too.
Yep.
So I just wanted to mention that.
That's a great point. You are listening to What Wise Women Want here on Charlottesville's Public Access Comcast Channel 13. Today we're talking about single motherhood. And our panel today, I'm Dr. Daria Brezinski. To my right is Jenny Gladding. Jenny is a photographic model and freelance writer. To her right is Treat Jackson, a tax preparer for the tax ladies. And to her right is Sara Greenfield, a real estate broker and jeweler. So I want to know, I know the answer to this for myself, but for women who are watching this show, did you ever take the time to grieve not being married or losing a spouse or whatever it was that happened to you? Did you ever take the time, and I'm not saying feel sorry for yourself, maybe that was part of it, I don't know, but did you ever take the time to grieve not being, because society is so pressuring us to be married, did you ever take the time to look at that and grieve for that?
I would have to say yes, because I so wanted how I was raised for my children. And then I just realized that that wasn't my path. But it took me a little while to get to that point. As my children were getting older, I felt like, well, what am I not doing to provide this for them? And then I realized that I was providing everything that they needed. And I was better with that. But it's pressure. It's pressure from society. It's pressure from a parent. It's pressure from wherever you are. But once you get okay with yourself, and I did, once you get okay with yourself, you're not as hung up or caught up on the fantasy, because the fantasy is not the norm in our society today.
Did you have any trouble? I mean, are you still?
Well, I would say that my situation came about, so it was a shock, and that I was faced with survival, and parenting young children. I mean, I still had a nursing, child. So there's an enormous amount of energy that goes into caring for young children. So, I'm trying to think, how am I going to survive, trying to meet my children's needs, and I really didn't have a lot of energy left over to process my loss. And so, I mean, I would say that it's just in the past couple of years, really, 11 years later, that I really started to be able to grieve those losses. And the other interesting thing about that, though, is that, I grew up with a father in my home, and he did provide for us. At least he provided financially and provided security. But he wasn't someone who was emotionally present, or who I felt, that I had a real kind of intimate and significant relationship with. So So it's interesting, you know, that he was there, he provided a certain life, but he wasn't there in another way. So,
But you did take some time at some point to start grieving that relationship.
I think it's just that the circumstances of my life made it possible, some space to open up for those feelings to come to the surface. Yeah.
Sarah, did you?
I didn't grieve.
No?
I was happy. I was out of there, got the house that I wanted to rent, had my free time and my own time with my son, and I was better off for it. I started grieving later on when later. It was a lot later. Certain things happened that we didn't anticipate, and so that's.
And it brought it up for you then?
Yeah, that's when it started. But I've never heard of grieving as a single parent. To be honest, I've never heard the concept before.
Really?
Never.
Never heard the concept, but you go
interesting
through an emotion,
Yeah.
and that's what it's
I've
associated
never
with.
heard about that.
Grieving the fact that you're a single parent? Is that, you've
Yeah,
never heard of that?
I've never heard of it.
But grieving the loss.
Well, I had a loss because my son's dad died, and that was a loss, and I grieved terribly that for him that his dad was no longer there for him ever again.
Yeah.
But that wasn't at the beginning of being a single parent. That was, midway to where we are today. So, but even then, we never talked about grieving. To be honest, I hate to say it, but never. We had to be strong. We had to move forward. We had to make a living. We had to put a roof over our kids' head. We had to put food on the table. There was no grieving.
Yeah, yeah.
And so
Yeah.
that is exactly my point. You said it as well. You all said it. There's no time
for
to
it.
take that
No
time
thought. I mean,
for, to be able to, do that. And it's part, it's something that you need to do because it helps you heal yourself and all those things that have happened to you, in order to be able to move on you keep on going, you can keep on going for so long, and then all of a sudden life catches up to you, And I think what happens is, that something is a catalyst that gets us to the point of grieving. I mean, I know for me, there was a situation that was a catalyst because I was so involved, working and keeping a roof over our head and feeding us and, making sure the kids were okay and all that kind of thing that I had no time to think about the relationship or what was happening. But I have to say, the amount of time that my ex kept bringing me into court, one day I turned around, I had kept all the papers in my garage, and one day a couple of years ago I took them all out and I went through how much money I had spent on lawyers, going through all these processes. And that was kind of the catalyst for me to go, oh my God, this was utterly ridiculous. How much, but what could I have done differently? It kept trying to take my kids away from me. So there was nothing I could have done differently except to keep on hiring an attorney in order to be able to keep my kids, in a different place. So, but, sometimes but I never had time before that to even think about it.
I had that same problem, and I forgot about it until you just mentioned it.
What's that?
Well, the divorce, the decree, the amount of money I had to put towards it, the fight of being able to keep custody or joint custody, because in this world, if a man gets sole custody, they don't have to pay any money to the woman. So they want to go for the sole custody, because in joint custody, they still have to pay.
Right.
So
depends on the state.
It depends on the state.
You're from Pennsylvania.
Depends on the state.
So it's a business decision. It's a business, and I'll tell you that court was just horrendous, and I wouldn't wish that upon anybody. That was awful. And I did grieve on the steps of the courthouse when it was done, and I forgot about it.
Well, I have to tell you, in Pennsylvania, there is a formula, okay? And in that, now I was an at-home mother, and that judge looked at my credentials and said, this is how much you should be making with your degrees, and that is how I am determining child support.
Wow.
And I got
Pennsylvania?
virtually
Yeah,
nothing.
Pennsylvania is
Yeah.
great with child
Same
support.
here, though.
But the judge,
Same
the
in
judge
Virginia.
was a female judge, and she said no mother should be home, staying home with her children. All mothers should be out working. And I went, oh, whoa.
Wow.
New time.
And we had, she was a female judge. My ex-husband had a female attorney, and I had I mean, there were all women in that room with the exception of my ex-husband, and I couldn't believe the things that I was hearing coming from this judge who said all women should be working, and, that's where you should
as
be.
a doctor. She saw you had a doctorate.
Exactly. Yeah. And you should be making this kind of money and not staying home with your children.
I have something to add to this bit about grieving, which is that I said that I began for the feelings to come up and to be able to grieve in the past couple of years, and it was about the loss and all the many, many losses associated with what happened. But interestingly, now my teenage daughter has begun to express her grieving at the loss of her father. And I think that when we don't have access to those feelings, that we probably are not able to really facilitate our children going through that as well.
Perfect. That is exactly. I was going to go on to the topic of how it affects the children. That's a perfect segue.
My son got very angry. He was very angry, and it stayed with him even, it still comes up. And now we have to repattern our communication. And we just took a vacation. My son treated me to my vacation. And I noticed that there were a lot of no's coming out. Let's go here, no. Let's go there, no. And I said, well, let's use the word yes. You tell me yes, and you tell me I'm awesome. And so for a day, he had to use the word yes and awesome. And it was so good to hear it, which is something I don't hear enough of.
Right.
But repatterning those answers from both the parent and the child is probably pretty important.
Yep. And I still get the anger. And a lot of things that I see in terms of being a counselor with families is that, especially if there's two children, one child sides with the mother, thinks they have to take the side of the mother, and the other thinks they have to take the side of the father and defend that position their whole life. I was astonished to hear that somebody else told me that he didn't want to go visit, one of my sons didn't want to go visit his father because he wanted to make sure I was okay, meaning that, and I know this as a therapist, a lot of times the child will try to become the spouse.
Yeah.
Have you had that happen?
Yeah. I call my son sometime my father's son because he's, you raise children, if you're a single parent, they are a little bit more independent than other children. And have to do some things like my son may have had to watch his sister or care for her because they're 8 years apart. But I noticed that in that regard that, yes, he thinks that sometimes he's my parent, but I'm the parent and I'll always be the parent, and I'll just have to let him know that I am the one that's the parent, so you need to back down. But no anger issues with my children with the absenteeism of their fathers. My children are well adjusted with that. They're very easygoing with it and welcoming of the relationship or not having a relationship.
Are they in college?
My daughter's about to go to ODU. My son is 26. He went to college, but now he's chosen another path in entrepreneurship, so I'm sure he'll be successful with that.
Like mother, like son.
Yes,
And
definitely.
he was around you.
Yes.
So, so it's amazing my feelings right now. The more we're talking about this, the more my level of anger is rising at many different, as we're talking about this, I just can't believe that even me who has processed a lot of this that we're having a conversation about, I still feel like a lot of things are, rising inside of me. Some of the anger that I've felt over the years and, the things that have happened. So I'm not sure I really worked on this really, really hard, and I'm not sure if you don't seem like it seems like it goes away sometimes.
Well, I think when your kids start to show that they're capable of owning their own business or working in a situation where they're happy, you do tend to let that go, and your parenting is somewhat
responsible.
Yeah, I'm not angry or sad anymore to his dad or to the situation. I walked away. It's a well-known fact in my family. I walked away for several reasons. And my son is very successful today, and I couldn't be more proud. My anger at times would be that I'm not where I want to be today, because I put so much of my energy into raising my son that
Boy, do I know that.
I let go of, 8 years ago, I let go of the gemstone collection. Actually, 9 years, I let go of the gemstone collection, and I'm going back into jewelry now, 9 years later. I'm not really doing the things that I thought I'd be doing at this age. And so for that reason, I'm not happy and I'm angry or frustrated. But it has nothing to do with my son.
Okay.
Oh boy, can I really speak to that?
Go ahead.
Oh my gosh. Well, I think I had a fairly accomplished life when up until my disaster where I lost my husband and all that went with that. So I had this modeling career all through my 20s, and then I went back to school. I came back to UVA and I finished my undergraduate degree, and I finished with honors, and Phi Beta Kappa, and went off to graduate school with a full fellowship, and it was all very exciting. And I wasn't entirely happy with this graduate program, so I left, but I still thought I had a lot of time in front of me to figure things out. And I ended up getting married and starting a family, and my former husband also saw me going back to school and getting a doctorate. So I was an aspiring academic, and oh my gosh, there I was, how to survive, raise young children, and no energy. I don't think I even could have imagined having the mental horsepower that I had before, or the energy or the resources to go back to school and finish that career path. So that is a huge issue for me. It's huge because here I am, I've got, teenage girls, and I've worked in an administrative position at UVA for an academic research institute that was a really, really interesting place to be, that was with all the academics doing the work that I was passionate about, but that I couldn't do because I didn't have the degree. So I get that in a big way. It's hard.
Do you find yourself resenting your kids at all for any of this?
Never.
That never occurred to me to resent my kids. No.
Me either.
No.
No.
Definitely
Just
not.
wanted to be let our audience be clear,
Yeah.
because we've said we focused our lives and created our lives around our children. I just want to make sure that people understand that we are not resentful in the least for our children. Just in the life that we thought we were going to have, myself included. Never thought I'd be in the place I'm in right now. Had a totally different perspective on where I was going to be in this lifetime. And of course that meant being married at this point for, 50 years or, 45 years, whatever it is. 50 actually.
I did do quite a bit of inner work during that time. And when my son was young, I did a lot of inner work, and I experienced many different, cultural, whether it be Jewish, because I'm Jewish, or other areas of unity, or other areas where I could do my spiritual work or religious work, what have you. But I found that was very important to have some spirituality behind what I was bringing
Oh, I think
forward.
absolutely.
For me, it was really important to have the love for my son. I also had the love for myself.
Yeah.
And you do lose that when you're on your own.
Well,
It's, you become a tough bird, and you have to be. So you need to love yourself as well, and you have to bring that in. And that's something that was very big for me.
I think that's a really important point. That's the redeeming point. Where we're talking about the regret or the sadness.
Grievement.
Yeah, and that is the whole, for me, is the blessing in the midst of all of it is the personal development, the spiritual development that's taken place.
I think
So
the hard
thank you for
part.
reminding.
I think the hard part for me was not knowing who I was. I identified myself as a wife and mother, and whatever job I was in. I was an educator, and I identified with that. And the minute it went away, it took me floundering for a long, long time, going from one job to the next. First of all, because I had to support my children, but going from one job to the next, trying to figure what makes me happy, what do I want to do, where do I need to go? Because now all of a sudden everything I thought was true for me is no longer true.
Yeah.
So who am I, and where do I want to go in my life? And it took me a long time, and going from job to job to job to kind of figure that out. Did you feel that way?
As I said, I had a lot of jobs, but my circumstances were different because I didn't have a husband first. I had to build my life, and my son got to go along for the ride. So in that regard, things are different than everybody else's, and no regret. You get to it how you get to it, and I'm happy for that. But
Your mom helped you take care of your son?
my mom was a very hands-off. She was very hands-off in that, and still, she was like she's not that kind of grandma. She wasn't that kind of grandmom. She is now to her, because the grandchildren range from 30 to 6. So she's that kind of grandmom in some regards now, but she's not.
So it was your sister or your aunt?
When I moved to Charlottesville, my children were 2 and 10. So my
There was
sister
nobody.
lives exactly. My sister lives close by, but as I was telling you earlier, we didn't get close until like the last 5 years. So we were essentially our own little family unit, and everything was for us, with us, as a group.
So let's kind of move towards a happier kind of note for people who are watching us. What are the joys of, we've kind of been facing a lot of the negative kind of stuff. What are the joys of single parenting? Oh, come on.
Not to be selfish, not having to share the decisions with anybody else is one of the joys, and having healthy, well-rounded, loving children that are productive members in society. For me, when I look at my children, I know that people love them, and they are definitely welcome in any community because they can see that love.
Yeah.
Okay. Sarah, the joys of being a single mother.
My son just took me on a vacation that I had a great time for a week, and I never would have thought that he would have been able to do this at such a young age. So I am very happy that...
To Paris.
Ooh.
Yeah, he took me to France
Well,
for my birthday, which is on July 14th. But anyway, the joy that I have is to be able to say that I was lucky enough to have a child, that I am not childless, and I'm very grateful for that.
Jenny, the joys of single motherhood.
Yeah, that's well said. It's being able to have children, and of course, I know I would put that into this, not to be selfish about it, but being able to make your decisions about, what you're doing. And it is kind of, having said before the regret about not accomplishing some of the things I thought I was going to accomplish, it's pretty amazing. It's just pretty amazing to be responsible for nurturing and developing human beings. That's that's a pretty big, amazing job.
Well, I will tell you, looking back on, remember I said all the jobs that I did and trying to find myself and, wasn't quite sure the direction and all of that. Well, it turns out now, my children are grown, very proud of them. They're both very successful. And it turns out that every single skill I acquired for all those different things that I did, I now teach to others. I am sought after for teaching about business. I am sought after for teaching parenting. And never would I have thought that all of that, all of those things that I did, and, having my own businesses at this point, I've discovered, like, we're in social networking right now. Well, it turned out that all those skills that I acquired, and I did create my businesses around my children so I could be with them all the time. I own my own businesses. And it turns out that all of those skills that I acquired during that time can be translated into social networking right now. So, my family used to say you're meandering all over life. You have no focus, whereas everybody else in my family is 9 to 5 or, is set in a career in one track going one place. And I appeared to be going all over the place searching for whatever it was that made me happy. But in fact, all of those things brought me to this place today. And so there is no regret, because now, I mean, initially I looked back and said, it's not going where I wanted it to go. I wanted to retire and, travel the world with my husband and all those. And that's not what was in the cards for me or those of us who are single mothers. And yet we come with it with different kinds of skills and different kinds of joys and successes. And there's nothing that makes me prouder, as many of you know, with my children and how wonderful, they are and how creative they are. And, that's my greatest joy to be. I don't like to say I'm proud, but I am, with their successes in life. So, there are many joys that come out of being a single mother, and it's hard. It's really, the one thing I would have said when I asked you initially, can you express how it feels, single motherhood? The one word that constantly comes into mind is no sleep, no sleep, no sleep, lack of sleep, lack of sleep. For me,
Sleep
that was it.
deprivation.
Yeah. Always, I just felt like I was always tired, because mine were little too. They were 3 and 4. So, I felt like I never got a rest at any moment. They seem to be on different schedules too all the time. So, but as we wrap up and at the end of our show here, is there anything that we haven't covered that you would like to express in terms of anything that you'd like to cover that maybe we haven't really talked about? Sarah?
I think we covered it.
You're fine?
Yeah, I am.
Tree?
I think we pretty much covered it, that being a single parent is not a death wish or anything like that. We do some pretty good work on our own as women. So,
Yep. Jenny?
I'm not sure I can add anything to what we've already talked about, just off the cuff.
Okay. Well, I cannot tell you how much I appreciate, your being here today and being open and honest with, our audience, because a lot of times, some of these things are really painful to talk about. And my objective is to get people talking about single motherhood more and more and more, because it's a reality of our society and it is something that we really need to address. Thank you so much for joining us, and we hope you would continue to watch us week after week. You can go to our website, www.whatwisewomenwant.com, and find out more information. Thank you, and join us again.